And,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait. Thank you very much, Philip, for this kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here and having the opportunity to share my research with you. So I'm going to share the screen now. Wait a moment. Yes. Okay, good. Here it is. So the title of my presentation is The Affective Dimension of Trust. Why emotions make us trust an AI. First of all, I would like to provide some framework for this presentation. So as Philip said, I am a philosopher. I'm working especially on emotions. And the framework of this presentation is mostly the extended mind view within the broader 4E cognition. So the idea that cognition is embodied, embedded, enactive, and extended. I will say something more in a moment about this. And within this conceptual framework, I understand emotions as relational properties. So I challenge the view of emotions as something like an inner property of the mind, an inner state, but I work on emotion as what is modulated and regulated through social interactions. And this has also brought me to investigate the topic of affective habits. So how is possible that through this regulated interaction, certain specific disposition to feel can emerge? And I think that pragmatism can help a lot for understanding it. And so here there is a reference to a paper I wrote with Roberta Dreon. But in particular, as Philip already said, I'm now working on the role of emotions in technology, I mean, in the interaction with technological devices, artificial intelligence, and robots. And so the paper that I'm presenting today comes mostly from this forthcoming paper that I wrote with Mark Stapleton from Edinburgh, Assistive Technologies as Affective Scaffolding. And it has also to do with another paper that I wrote with Iran Mansouri from Birmingham, Can We Have Cultural Robotics Without Emotions? So let's start. This is the plan for today. I will first introduce my case study, that is the one of assistive technology. Then I will understand this within the broader conceptual framework of extended cognition. I will point to some strengths and flaws of this approach, and from there I can deliver my alternative. That is the one that says that we need to focus on the affective dimension of trust for integrating why it is possible that a human being can have cognitive integration, this is a technical term, with a technological device. That means how is possible that this device became part of a cognitive system and so can experience the world through it. So let's start with some working definition. So assistive technology. Assistive technology is a very broad umbrella term, and it refers to all the devices that people with disabilities or the elderly or people that are recuperating from operations use in order to fulfill some task. So we can really think about the simple walking cane, but mostly now we are focusing on a very high-tech assistive technology, and especially in the last days, and this is still an ongoing program, this technology that are adapted with artificial intelligences. So we can think about smart glasses, cognitive hearing aids, but it is also very interesting to look at the different apps that can be included in certain devices. So for example, the Brain Not Touch that can have specific apps that can support in order to perform certain cognitive tasks. So there are apps that allows, for example, to see around and with a camera to discover what is there for a person with blind impairment, seeing AI. and this replaced in a way a former app that was Be My Eyes, where human beings as volunteers were part of this project, and so the people with visual impairments can call one of the volunteers and ask them to tell them what is there. In this case, with this new app, Seeing AI is not necessary anymore the support of this human being volunteer, because the artificial intelligence can recognize what is there for the person with visual impairment. So assistive technology is that. It's very, very general umbrella terms for these devices that can assist people with disabilities. So within this general framework, it is very interesting for me to look at the interaction between a user and a device, especially the one that has AI integrated. And so this is a very starting point, a very intuitive claim. So it seems that many people with disability rely on assistive technology in order to achieve cognitive tasks. And it seems also that there is a close relationship with their AT. And it seems that this relationship with their AT is not just something that can help, but it really allows to achieve more than they could without them. And in particular situation, they allow them to achieve what they cannot achieve without. And this is a very, very important difference between technologies that can just augment capacities and a technology that really can replace a biological function. So this was the general intuition that was at the ground of a pilot project at the University of Edinburgh, Extended Cognition in the Classroom. I was part of the research team for this project. And the main goal was to investigate if the framework of the extended mind and extended cognition could be helpful for understanding what is the interaction between user with visual impairments and their technology. So we had this project that was also empirical. So we collected data and made interviews with teachers and students at the Royal Blind School in Edinburgh. And so before going into more details, I think that it is necessary that I say something more about this extended mind approach. So the core question is this: where does the mind stop and the rest of the world begin? So this question has been addressed by Andy Clark and David Chalmers for criticizing an internalist view about the mind and cognition. And the idea was to show that external objects do not only just play causal relationships towards the internal cognition, you know, like a stimuli that can trigger retrieval of certain informations or something like that. But the main idea was that these external tools are, in certain situation, constitutive of extended processes of cognition. So the idea is that we need to extend the cognitive system to include external objects that are part of the environment of the interaction. So the user and the technology are seen as an extended cognitive system. And so this view really going beyond the merely instrumental relationships with an object, right? So that I can just simply use this pen for writing, and this is my tool, just the instrument that I deliberately use for taking notes. The idea is that in specific cases of extended cognition, and of course the main problem is establishing when and why we have these cases, these tools can become vehicle of cognition, so they can also perform cognitive processes. So this is the general framework. And in order to see if this framework can help for better understanding what is going on when there is this close relationship within a user and a technological device, we conducted some interviews, and these questions comes from the interviews with the teacher at the school, that for me are quite interesting, because the point was to understand the transition process from just using the technology as an instrument to becoming a fully successful user of it. And in the case of assistive technology, this seems that this happens when this device is endorsed in a fluent and automatic way. So it is not anymore something external to you, but it becomes part of the way through which you can achieve certain cognitive function. So also we tried to understand what are the issues which prevent this fluent and automatic integration at home and in the school. And also we wanted to understand if this had an influence to the self-perception. So if the user would describe himself or herself as extended through this device or not. So one paper came out about this from this project for now, and it is this paper by some other member and colleague of this research team, so Duncan Pritchard, Andrea English, and John Ravenscroft, that has been published last year in STENGHTS. There we need first to focus on devices that support specifically cognitive processes, because of course we can discuss what kind of processes are supported by this assistive technology, and there are certain that arguably are not cognitive, right? So they really focus more in these tools that support the information processes in terms of communication or enhancement of memory. And in particular, they focus on vision aid technologies. So we can consider the brain not touch as the best example of assistive technology integrated with AI, you know, because it is a new braille that is integrated within a tablet with different apps that enhance through the artificial intelligence its capacities, what it can offer to the person with visual impairments. So the main argument of this paper is that the use of external cognitive research as this brain not touch is cognitively integrated when, and I have already said this word, when there is a fluent employment and is fluent as corresponding to non-extended cognitive process. So the idea is here. So if for retrieving an information, I can automatically rely on my biological memory, this kind of automatism and fluent and immediate access to the information should be found also when I employ an external device for retrieving this information. The example provided by Clark and Chalmers in their paper was exactly a notebook where a person with Alzheimer can take notes of the addresses of the places where he wants to go, so without relying to the biological memory. So here we have a parity principle in place. So we needed to find this situation in which we can recognize a functional parity between a non-extended process and the extended one. And if we can find that there is a functional parity, so this is the main claim, we can say that this is a case of extended processes. And Pritchard English and Ravenscott also say that it's not just a matter of parity principle, but it is really a matter of integration. So they speak in terms of fully integrated with the user that are fully integrated with the technology. And so they say that this happens when the tool is not perceived anymore as a tool, as an external tool, but become transparent, and it is what through which the user can experience the world. So this is the function of automatic endorsement. So there is much more to this paper. I cannot discuss it in detail now, but just let me say something for moving towards my alternative view. So I think that what is fundamental and so good in this paper is having stressed that there are productive struggle to adapt to IT. So it is not a given that there is an integration with an IT. And exactly for them, this productive struggle are what brings to this transition and at the end to the integration of technology into the student's cognitive character, to the student's epistemic character. That means in the way through which the students can process informations or retrieve memory. These are their main cases. But focusing on productive struggle, that I think that is really a key move, for me is good, but the problem is that in this paper, they did not have captured, focused on the qualitative dimension of this productive struggle. So the qualitative dimension of the interaction and its impact to cognitive integration. So they really described this struggle in a merely functionalist way without looking at the experience of the user and how much this experience matter for really accepting to endorse this instrument, this technological device, and at the end, trusting it. So here you see that I'm already starting to introduce my main thesis. So my point here is that we need to focus on the how of the experience of cognitive integration. So what is unclear in their approach is how this integration shapes the user's quality of life, right? So because as I said, the relationship with assistive technology is so close that is full of an affective experience that seems to be fundamental, at least in my reading, in order to get to this cognitive integration. And here I can provide some examples from the interview, so we can read them together. So the first one, you know, they would be lost without that. So this is the functionality of this becomes part of who they are. So you see here, there is not just a functional employment of a device, but this device becomes part of the self, because this device really matters to them, because without that, they cannot do what they need to do. And here we have this proposition, but there is no element of choice. You know, you are blind, you are going to be using a brain, not touch. So here there is this element of necessity. And this necessity, again, is something that has to do with existential needs and concerns and selfhood. So, and here it is quite interesting in the process of transition from using a tool and being fully integrated to it. It's like you say that acceptance that comes with age and experience that says, I need to embrace that as part of who I am. But I think as children and young people that this is a very hard thing to do. This comes from a professor who was also with visual impairments. And so he really spoke very well about this transition and the need that at some point you accept that you need to use this tool, but accepting this also going to reframe the concept of the self and becomes part again of who I am. And this is important also in terms of the quality of life of the person. So the last quote, so he was very locked into his own world. So this piece of technology helped him break out of his world. And it's that immediacy, isn't it, of communication. So you see, here we really see the benefit, the importance of getting this level of high reliance on the technology, on the assisted technology. And here it was speaking about the communicative immediacy that was supported by the employment of another type of braille for people with visual impairments, that is the Brailliant, that is a braille that can be integrated to a laptop. So, well, exactly, I think that you can see how these quotes started to disclose the affective dimensions that permeate this interaction between a user and an assisted technology. And so here we have my main claim that full integration can result in the user being not only augmented by the technology, but potentially also experiencing the world through it. And when we think in terms of experience, the affective experience seems to be crucial for the integration of assistive technology. So in order to bring this affective dimension into place within this specific conceptual framework, that is the one of extended cognition, I think that we can use what Andy Clark has called the glue and trust criteria for cognitive extension. So Clark was looking for some criteria that can help for differentiating between standard and usual ways of employing tools, external tools, and situations in which these tools became part of an extended cognitive systems. And it says that are necessary some glue and trust criteria, and these are listed here. So I say that there should be a constancy in use, so it is not that you just use an IT once and you became extended with it, and there is a cognitive integration. So it has to do with an habitual interaction, and also there should be a direct availability. You know, you do not need to search for it, but it should be handy, immediately there, in order to have this automatic endorsement. So something that goes very unreflective and immediate, as if it is something that belongs to your body. But this automatic endorsement is in dialectics with a conscious past endorsement. So the idea that at start you choose, you want to use this AT, so you started to learn how to use it, and from there habits of integration started to develop, and you can get to the automatic endorsement. So, well, I think that these criteria are very helpful. We cannot discuss their efficacy now in detail, but what is really strange to me is that they are called glue and trust criteria, but there is no conceptualization on the trust dimension in them. Really, they are described in a very basic way without considering really the how of the integration. And so I think that we need to better frame this criteria within the idea of trusting an AI. And this trust, and here so it is necessary a full conceptualization of trust, for me, should be understood as a disposition. So I do not take trust as an emotion per se, but I take trust as a very complex disposition with cognitive and affective and volitional dimension. In general, we can say that there is a disposition to expect an agent, so also an AI, to behave in a manner that supports one's interest and well-being. So there is an expectation in there. So there is the first level of accepting to undertake a relationship with this agent, but from this acceptance, trust can emerge when you expect that this will be good for you. And another point that is so important is a distinction between blind trust and critical trust. So blind trust is just trusting without any reasons, I can say. So here we are missing the epistemic, the evaluative dimension that it should be there. So in a way, this AT should have proven to me that is efficient, that so I can trust it, that so it is a good device that I can trust. And here it would be interesting to understand what can be this reason and how the evaluation is done. But the point here is that from blind trust, there can be a transition to a critical trust. So where you assess the efficacy of the AT, of the assistive technology, and so you can confide in it. Saying that trust is a disposition and not just an emotion per se also means that it's a disposition that can be cultivated and manipulated. So there are different forces in place here. And of course, and here, if we think in terms of the epistemic cultures that are around us, there are also certain cultures that can make us trust in things that are not really to be trusted. So here there is always a dialectics and a conflict between blind trust and critical trust. And I think that the affective dimension, and this is another point of my research that I cannot argue for it here, can play important evaluative function, so epistemic function, and not taking the evaluative or cognitive aspect as something in opposition to the affective trust. But in a way, there is a very deep entanglement between them. And so we can have a critical trust that is also affectively felt. And the other point that for me is important to say is that trust is not gains once and forever, because especially if we think trust in an artificial intelligence or a device that has been implemented by AI, these devices are subject to change for updates, new software, etc., etc. So the user should learn how to use them again and again. So it is a process of trusting this device, and in a way, this also can be very disruptive. Actually, in one of the interviews that we conducted in the school, and this interview is also reported in the Pritchard et al. Paper, there is a description of Max, who is a student who had to move to a new Braille device because his previous one was not anymore updated. And so the company decided to change it and producing a totally new device. And this was extremely disruptive for the students because he cannot trust the new device. He really wanted to keep the previous device. And so there has been a real process of getting used to it. And at the end, they had to invite someone from the company that produced this device in order to explain and reply to all the concerns that the students had towards it. So in a way, this is interesting because in order to trust this new device, the student needed to meet a person who represented the company that explained to him the value of the device. But in this example, we find also another thing, that this was not enough for him, because after having met one of the officer of this device, he still was not convinced by it, and he decided, with the support of the family, to buy a different device, a Brilliant. And when he decided to do it, the teacher described that to us this as a decision that was full of enthusiasm, expectation, and really the idea, reading the many blogs about this new device, relying on the efficacy of this device. So here you see how much also this affective dimension of trusting or learning to trust a device is fundamental for accepting to use it and finally being integrated into it. So without this enthusiasm and this support of the family and the support of other people with visual impairments in the online sphere and in the discussion in forum online, he would not accepted to use this new device. So this is extremely interesting for me. So here we have the main points, that there is an affective dimension of trust. So trust, as I said, is not per se an emotion, but we can find feelings as affection, anxiety, confidence, hope, relief, and gratitude that are familiar aspects of the experience of trust. And in particular, relating to trust in AI, or in my case, an AT, an assisted technology with AI implemented, I think that we can discover this dimension. So an affective engagement in the interaction with AT, a feeling of security in the face of vulnerability. So here again, there is always a dialectics. So trust has to do with a feeling of security, but this security is in the face of risk, vulnerability, something that need to be fulfilled and overcome in a way. And also, this is another point that is important to me. We can recognize a feeling of agency in learning how to use AT, and this has to do a lot with the selfhood and the self-description of the user. So the agent can feel that they can do something, so they are the real owner of the process, and this goes against this view of the automatic endorsement of the extended mind. And so I think that the extension has more to do with a feeling of extension. So in a way, at a certain point, the user can feel that is part of this broader cognitive system. And so in a way, this tool becomes part of herself, himself. And then there is also a specific type of the embodiment in the interaction. Then another point that for me is really crucial. So when we think of trust, the affective dimension of trust, we need to think it in terms of a disposition and an habit. So affectivity is regulated by habits. So in these recursive interactions with AT, users can build their affective habits. So the way through which they can experience the world with the AT. So this has to do with what I said before, that there is a conscious past endorsement of AT. So there is a choice. We can say that is fundamental, a choice of accepting to use this device, and because you assessed it as something valuable. But again, this choice then is reiterated through the time. It can become an habit, so can become something of pre-reflective or automatically, but this is not just a process that goes by its own, because it replies to it is an answer to an existential needs. So here, really, I wanted to stress this existential dimension of trust as affective. So relying on an assistive technology is something that really helps the person to fulfill her needs and having a good life at the end. So here I have a critical question. So we may ask, but is it really trust, what I'm describing? Is not better to understand it as reliance or dependence? Why are we speaking in terms of trust? So the objection can also keep going, saying that we can just trust human beings. We cannot trust object, or we cannot trust AI. So what does it mean? Or maybe when we say, okay, we trust AI, we are not trusting the actual device, but we are trusting the producing companies. So as we saw in the case of Max that I reported. And this also can open other question about, is it possible to trust a robot? Trust a caring robot or a social robot? Well, I think that for replying to this question, we need a further investigation. I will say that my intuition, my position is saying that yes, it is trust, but we really need to understand trust in this broader way as this existential disposition towards an object that can become part of myself. So it is not really trusting an object that remains out there as inanimate matter, but it is really trusting the possibilities that I can achieve through the employment of this object. Because the main idea is that the integration with this object can unfold new learning possibilities, can really allows the person to fulfill the needs that she needs. And then, of course, there are also empirical cases that can help us for replying to this question. In particular, in trusting robots, there are very interesting works that show that yes, we have empirical proof and data that humans can trust robots. There are ways that think this in terms of a joint commitment, and it seems that commitments need trust, and so there is trust there. This is a paper by Michael and Salice, or Sherry Tarkle would have speak in terms of evocative object, so this object speaks to us, etc., etc. But here I just take the last 3-4 minutes for saying the last crucial point for replying to this question. Is really trust? I say yes, if we understand it in this existential dimension, but it's also trust if we understand the trust as relational and social. So it is not just a relationship between myself and an external tool, but this interaction is within a broader social dynamics. In the case of ATE with students, was in the social dynamics of the classroom. So it is really dependent also upon the support that the teacher and the other students, and at the end also the family, how much they trust this device, and so this can help the user of accepting it or not. I'm not going to read this quote now because there is not time. So here a recap. My view is that we can understand this trust in AI within this extended cognition view if we fight against a neutral or merely functionalist view of the extended mind, but we really need to understand this interaction as a form of existential necessity. Then the other point is fighting against the utopia of the fully integrated user. I think that this was the main problem of the Pritchard et al. Paper. They wanted really to say that the cases that we encountered were cases of full cognitive integration. But I think that if we really work on trust, we understand that this is just an utopia, because trust always have to do with vulnerability, risk, and moreover, the feeling of agency, the fact that I am who is into this project is something that is in time and has to do with processes and dialectics and challenges. So I really continue to need to reiterate my trust for the AI, and this has to do also with the possibility of building a good level of self-confidence. And here, yes, we have just a vignette about the manifold emotions that can happen here. And so having in mind this full and nuanced picture of the emotional dimension of trusting AI also help us for understanding that we cannot have full integration just achieved and is there and no problem anymore. So my idea is that we need to move towards a responsible extension. So really focusing on this feeling of agency of the user and the idea that you can trust AI because through the engagement of this technological device, in the case of AT, the agent can extend their action possibilities and so increase their feeling of agency in the world. So this is my last final question, and I let it open. I think that this is just my position, that we cannot have a phenomenology accurate description of what trust in AI means without considering its affective dimension. But it seems that we can argue also for a stronger thesis, the one that says that without affective trust, cognitive integration is not attainable most of the time. I couldn't argue for it in detail now in this presentation, but my argument goes into this direction. But I let this as an open question for now. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here for some questions.
Wonderful.